the same square that has all the different ways to fly out of ArcCorp Area 18 has the ArcCorp skyscraper the other direction. So if you're coming from the trams that are flying around, you would cut across those from the shuttles, trams, whatever you call them, to the other side of that square, and you end up at the Area 18 skyscraper. This IO skyscraper has an elevator. You take the elevator and there's signs telling you, but it's on the left, and then this will lead you out here. Obviously there's not supposed to be a ship parked there, upside down, but welcome to the Idris. Now it's a little hectic, probably the same way it'll be on Fleet Week most of the time, but it is quite a loadout. So I guess this is as good a spot as any to start. This is one of the cargo areas that I talked about. You can see 24 SCU max, 24 SCU max on these grids. And then from rooms like this cargo area, you also have some more of the equipment that is off to the sides that is not designed to be a pure cargo grid. So there's a few different areas on capital ships that are full of as much cargo as possible. Let's see if they'll let me inside the maintenance areas. Looks like they pulled that panel right there. That's probably where you used to access. It's interesting. I don't want to speculate, but if you really asked me to guess, I would say that these might be drones or mech suits or something like that. Like holders, like the exosuits, not the giant ones. All right, let's drift into medical. Again, this is a pretty large ship, so I'm going to try to focus down the important spots. You can see this little medical area, complete with medical storage, which in the past was considered pretty important because the idea is that they keep changing their mind, but at many points, CIG was talking about using these medical supplies were meant to have, they were meant to require medical supplies to run these stations. So when you had a tier 3 bed, it would use a certain amount of medical supplies, but a tier 1 bed would consume a completely different level of supplies. So tier 1 being the best bed, tier 3 being the cheapest bed, so to speak, had less options. They would consume less supplies, but it would obviously be limited. So these beds are most likely tier 3 or 2, probably 3, and in the current system, and then this would be your tier 1 bed for regen and everything else, and full medical services, but consumes more supplies, especially on this more advanced processes. Many people, including myself, have theory crafted that what would make the most sense for such a large ship and during the heat of a battle that has a bunch of people respawning, to allow them to respawn here and then instantly knock them into one of the extra recovery beds. As long as there's an open bed, you would be allowed to respawn here. So as people flow out of here, they shoot over here to land, and then in the heat of a battle, you would have like a bunch of shotguns and armor and stuff like that, or repair tools if it's earlier in the battle and you haven't been boarded, and they would be like, basically, get the hell out of here. Here's a suit, here's your tools, get out. And I am one of the people that believes that is highly likely how this would actually be used. Additionally, this is a very difficult to defend position because you have 2 doors, and then you can take these areas here. I'm curious how this is going to work when an enemy takes this position. Like, can they disable this bed, specifically this 1 bed? And then as soon as this is disabled, does that shut down regen on this entire capital ship? It'll be interesting. Right now, we just have kind of placeholder tech. Even if this was being released, say, by the end of the year at IAE, which is optimistic, but is entirely possible. It has been in the past that players have speculated, saying, you know, it could be a thing where they do release this before Squadron, even though there has been a long-standing policy of most likely Squadron would be there when they release it, because in the very early days, 5 years ago and before, all the way back to probably not 13 years ago, but pushing back towards closer to the start of the program, there was this long mantra of whenever Squadron comes out, we get the Idris, and then later on when the Kraken was created as a concept, it's like, oh, the Krakens will come too. The Idris and the Kraken were kind of seen as the nemesises to each other, where the Kraken is kind of like the piratey one, where the Idris is more of the combat, pure, intentioned one, which I think is just plain silly. I think a lot of times you got to pick the ship that makes the most sense for what you're trying to do. So here's some suit lockers here. And what you're going to notice is this ship has like the equivalent of an exterior racetrack, I'll call it, with a lot of these hallways that just keep going and going. We're back towards the front doors because this is where the docking collar is. And then one of these tunnels that runs over the main hangar is there. So this is one of the rooms that was locked up in the past. Let's see if they fixed it up. And as was pointed out to a few different people, including myself, people said that it's all kind of awkward that the captain and the XO are right next to a huge bathroom. It's a little awkward, to say the least. But it looks like the rooms are... Nope, still locked. Wow. They still have not opened the XO quarters. Huh. That's wild. The captain's quarters is available, which is not bad. I mean, not bad at all. You know, it's not like you're going to have a lot of guests over, because one of the things that is not nice about this is if you have a restroom for hygiene and such, and somebody's visiting, they go to use the hygiene, they come back, they have to walk through the tiny bedroom. But, I mean, considering how big this ship is, this is not small, but, yeah. One thing I have heard from multiple people is don't sit in the seats. Some of them are really buggy, at least in these tests, where you cannot even backspace out of the seat. So bear that in mind. Nice view screen to give you your status to your for your captain's position. 3 storage lockers in the captain's quarters. And okay, I will have a fault here. I don't know what the hell the point of this is. I'm trying to be polite at that. Like, what in the heck is this waste of space? So you got one little shelf and all of this wasted space here, and the couch does not face the TV. You can only use these seats to watch the screen properly, as well as, of course, the captain's seat. This seems unfinished. Like, it seems like this area here should have like a pair of chairs, and then the captain swivels their chair pointed towards them to interview people. And I don't know. It seems like this walkway, you could have done it the other way too, where you could have had the walkway cut over here, and that way it doesn't feel like the captain's interview discussion area is like blocked off. But I guess what they're trying to say is that this L-shaped couch-ish, okay, I'm sure there's a fancy name for it, but that's what I'll call it right now. This corner couch is lined up with the captain's position where that swivel chair would probably go. But look at how far away they're sitting. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And anyway, all right, not my problem. It's not a bad quarters. You can see the XO quarters is far smaller. Again, some of the best quarters on the entire ship, but this is the hallway they view. This dark, dimly lit engineering hallway. And then there's a bathroom right next to them, down there. So, to get to that real quick, cover everything. You can see there's endless amounts of restrooms. The crew on this is supposed to be in the dozens, so if not more. There are showers, and of course lockers and sinks. So hygiene is a big thing in this game. Rarely, but when it is needed, you must have it or you have negative consequences. And another thing that's to factor in is that over time, hygiene becomes worse and worse if you don't treat it. There is an argument to be made with NPC crew that even if you don't like them, you're going to need them on your ship, because if you want your friends to be able to Agent Smith in, or your org mates to Agent Smith in and help support your ship, like during a fight or during logistics ops or whatever, they're going to need crew that are sitting on there, that are cleaned up and behaved and fed and not dying, so it's never a bad thing. These look like bugged out engineer maintenance only. These look like bugged out crew quarters. I am genuinely not sure. But these do look like the crew quarters, just they're really buggy right now. Like there's each one of the crew has its own locker, and then these are like double bunks. And well, the room's not working right now. That is, I believe, what they're trying to do. You can see they kind of have a chutes and ladders thing going on to get to yet another bathroom. This bathroom is smaller than the one over by the XO and Captain for some reason. This ship was built and it was described as one of its first reworks was described as like building an oil rig by CIG. And I was like, that is an awesome analogy, where there's so much packed into this ship as we go through this mess hall. So fun fact, one of the things that CIG worked on Squadron for quite a long time, but like obviously on tiny bits and pieces, was the mess hall AI. So I'm holding it to them. I'm going to call them out if there's a larger restroom, by the way, leading over from the XO and the Captain. So I'm going to head back this direction because we already explored that way. But I'm holding CIG to it that needs to be, they need to bring their A game when it comes to the crew in the mess hall enjoying their food. They better be damn good at it, because there was years and years and years of entries on Squadron 42 patch notes that described the reworks and works and reworks of the mess hall, which is wild. One of the most beautiful locations. Oh, I'm not going to get tricked by this. I was going to say one of the most beautiful locations in the whole ship is the control room. But I don't want to go wandering to another floor at this moment, except for maybe the stairs to the bridge. That might be kind of cool. So let's see. Yeah, because otherwise we're just going straight to the tunnel. And one of the reasons this might be a little confusing until you get used to it is like the ship's like a giant jagged oval. That's the best description I can come up with. It's just a jagged oval. Look at this. Look at this nonsense. A ship shaking another ship. Note the air shield. Both doors on the front and the back, if they open to the elements, they preserve the oxygen inside. So the air shield is just meant to keep the crew being able to not have to wear helmets inside and obviously have temperatures regulated and such. Because if you were exposed to the vacuum of space without those air shields functioning, that would be a bad day if you weren't wearing a vac suit. And even then, your time is limited, depending on the conditions outside. So you can see the 1, 2, and the 3. We saw the 1, now there's the 2, there's the 3. And the way these are set up, these giant metal things come out of the ground. And it's a little bit styled like the ski jump aircraft carriers in real life in the past and present, I guess I should say. But the idea is that these come up, and it might just be a rule of cool, but when you launch from here, those things are supposed to come up. and then a crew member like waves you on and off, that kind of thing in person. There's also an entire area dedicated to air traffic control, like ATC work from inside the hangar. And I mean, just look at the immensity of this space. I know I'm a broken record, but that's a player walking around down there. Look at the sheer scale of this hangar. And it's all interior with armored doors covering it when you don't open them. It's mind-bogglingly large. So the big thing is, can you fit more than 3 fighters? And the answer is yes. But to play a mind game here, what do you define as more than 3 fighters? Because people creatively squeezing 5 or even 6 fighters in there does not mean that they're going to be able to rearm and refuel on the pads. The pads are what I think a lot of people are thinking of when they think of how many can it fit. So officially it has 3 pads, but you could alternate all the different locations. I'm not going to go in the turret because I don't want to get stuck in it. There's another turret over here. If my memory serves me right, this turret has the nice views on both sides. Yeah, here it is. So one of my favorite spots on this whole entire ship is this. So when this thing's flying around, I have a very vivid memory of a time we managed to get a hold of an interior laden Idris a few years back. And I spent almost the entire time not in my turret. I just hung out in the space and I was like, this is beautiful. I love this style. I love this type of like little viewing area. And I want to give a nod where credit is due. I think sometimes CIG really does a good job on these areas on ships that just, they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to. They could have made this way simpler and just left it closed off, or just gave it a blank, like a copy and pasted window from something else. But instead, they gave it this beautiful, beautiful little view side on both the starboard and on both sides of the ship. So if you're talking about the ship in general, if you're looking at the one side, you're going to see the exact same thing on the other. However, there are things in the middle of the ship that lead from doorways and chutes and ladders that lead right to the same places. The bridge is an example of, it's in the center of the ship. When you get this far up, it gets big. Particularly its viewable areas. You can see this here. And you can see some poor soul that got stuck in the seat. And you can see some interesting stuff going on. Somebody brought up a Cuddy Blue with a limited paint. And a big old Polaris, because of course they did. It's wild to me, sometimes the player base and what they do. Why did a player bring a Polaris to an Idris? Because they could. So yeah, the bridge is quite spacious. The bridge has the hollow viewer. I think it's inferred that the captain of the ship would actually be back here, running this map area, giving out orders and issuing out to their entire crew here. I'm going to get away from this rendered out Polaris because apparently it is really, really draining my system resources. I think this is the smallest elevator in the ship when it comes to like where it can go. If my memory serves me right. So the mini docking area there for the, I think it's the escape pod for the bridge crew. And pieces of the ship. Oh, thank goodness they've updated the Idris to have fuses. That's cool. Well, apparently either they didn't spawn or everybody took them. But these spaces are going to be one of the reasons that the ship is going to be forced to be multi-crew, or, you know, people are going to be demanding more and more NPC crew faster, because trying to run to other parts of the ship is going to be a nightmare. Let me get to these areas here. Look at that scanner. It's beautiful. CIG suggested it was like a decontamination hallway. It's more rural cool, but let's see. Here's your engineering terminals. Coming soon. Engineering terminal coming soon. Low power. And then the core itself, which does come out. There is an animation where this comes out of the air and everything. I believe this comes down to it a little bit. This one looks a lot more finished, where that one seems like it's missing parts. Is a beautiful sphere. And also in this part of the ship is the briefing room. So, and that is more suit lockers, like I mentioned before. Some of these are even like little mini armories and such. You can see the first aid and supplies and stuff, but mainly it's suit lockers. Suit lockers are really important because if a ship, part of the ship is breached, I've always said the Idris is well suited for defending itself. You could spin the ship and then, or just have your crew go along a different corridor, because there's multiple corridors to the same place. It's built for redundancy. You could seal off one and still maintain air. However, at some point you're going to want a suit. You know, if the ship is getting beat up enough, you're going to need a suit. Let's see the sheer size of this. The Jav has like a one that's like double the size of this briefing / flight briefing room. It's basically this copy and pasted double. So you have one on the one side and then one facing the other side with a hollow viewer in the middle. This, on the other hand, has this huge hollow viewer space built into this space here without that. I think these UAE Navy flags are not the greatest to have on this gridding material, because this is all supposed to be like hollow presentation area as far as I know. If they turn this on, and this is supposed to like shoot a grid array out and stuff, and this seems like this should be over here and that should be over there. So anyway, the room is decorated very well. I like this banner. I like the simplicity of it. I hope that owners of these ships will get to use these banners. So the Jav and the Idris in particular, they've had these events endlessly for so many years. I really hope the owners can finally get some fun things like this. It would be cool to get like a paint, like a limited edition paint that allows you to get all this stuff. Not limited, but like seasonal, I should call it. Like you can attain it at Invicus by completing a whole bunch of things, and it's every year you can go back and do it if you missed out the first time. More relays. Gosh, so many relays. Suit locker. These escape pods are pretty tricky. You think it's just escape pods, and that leads to other places. I'm gonna stay on this side of the oval, the weird shaped oval. Elevators, and then there's like I think staircases in there as well. Also, I'm thinking of the Jav. A little engineering space snuck in here. This may be the primary cargo bay. Let's see. Yep, this is it. So, this is the main cargo bay. You heard me talk up so much. You know, the other one only had a few 24 SCUs, and you're probably like, what is the deal with that? You know, this is the proper cargo bay that is designed to go down into the hangar. Hangar is good. Hangar is your friend. So you can take a whole bunch of material and ship it down to the hangar through this system. There's dual elevators, one on that and one on this end. Notice the gantries up top to help move the nice big containers, probably 16 SCUs and parts and stuff for the different airships. And then bam, you're out here delivering goods onto this amazing space. So whenever you're talking about the hangar, you can't ignore the fact it has that cargo bay attached to the hangar, which is all important to note. I think with a lot of these things, we try to think of things in a vacuum, and this ship is just so interconnected on every step of the way. You know, you go into a hangar and you can see like capital size module storage, capital size module component locations, I should say. But anyway, let's get back to where we were at. And look at just how fast these elevators are. You know, the contractors that put this in should go back, and the ones that made the Polaris one should be fired, and these people should make the new ones. The Polaris elevator is an embarrassment. And the only reason it was set up that way is so you could not solo the Polaris as easily. They made the Polaris's main elevator from the bridge down to the deck where you have the size 10 torp station, and then right next to that's the size 6 turret location, which keeps getting buffed and nerfed every single build cycle this go around. They made them right next to each other relatively, but then when you use that elevator, they slowed down the elevator to a crawl to the point where it feels like it's minutes between each time. Like it's an eternity, it feels like. And that's very frustrating for a lot of backers. It's just nuts, the size of the ship, the mess halls and stuff and everything else. Okay, so we're back to the captain's quarters. We're back to a lot of the main things. We went through the ready rooms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run now. I rarely ever run in this game, but we're going to go find the brig. Now, off to the sides of this ship, there's some interesting little nooks. There is these offshoots, I'll call them. And in these offshoots is actually really important services that differentiate this ship. So some of the services that traditionally are on a capital class vessel is a proper armory, brig of some sort, which is like a storage area for bounties and for criminals and such and for enemies. This is the brig. and medical with regeneration capacity, so people can respawn on board. And normally there's a few other services like a hangar or something else. Not necessarily a hangar, but in general, capital ships tend to have at least a hangar for smaller vessels. So you have a control room for the brig. You can see that they're gonna try to have cameras implemented, and then, bam, 1, 2, 3, and there's 6. I think there's 6 in here. 4, 5. And 6 is all the way at the end here. Apologies for the lag. It's being impacted while I'm exploring this area. But this is quite important, because what is interesting about having this many beds inside the brig is if you can lock these doors open, people that are going to go AFK for long term, you could just have them hang out in these. I mean, they have hygiene, they have a bed, they have some rudimentary storage, I suspect. And that's 6 more. I mean, this is an entire row of 6 freaking of more beds and rooms, whole rooms, private rooms, no less. Most people in this game are sitting on bunk beds, and yet these folks would be able to have their own rooms. Why do I keep talking about that stuff? Well, when you log out, especially as an organization, having as many beds and storage for people's personal stuff is imperative, and having all these different services so you don't have to keep going back to base every 5 seconds. So and so logged in, and now we got to go back just because they have to go take a shower and eat some food. It's like, that's not acceptable. We're going to have food on here. We're going to have hygiene on here. We're going to have water on here, at the very least. And then you can get into the entertaining stuff. So you can have like your Big Bennies and your arcade games and your hollow runners and stuff like that would allow you to get more out of the experience for backers between fights and between different landings and making new outposts and whatever else. That's the goal anyway, while they're waiting for everyone else to log in. Here's escape pods that are behind the brig, and then inside here we're back in the track. So in order for me to get to where I need to go around to the other side of the ship. This huge ship, and there's a turret on the back that is now functional again, which is nice. But in order for me to get there, I have to go around the entire ship, and this is going to look familiar. It's the opposite of the other escape pod row in the right side of the ship. I'm just going to use left and right and keep this simple. Getting tired. Another empty relays. And we should be hitting the armory and the shooting range. That's right, I said shooting range. There's an entire automated system. Those are the tracks of like a traditional shooting range, where like you can send the thing, well, high-tech shooting range, and you can send these shuttles back and forth to deliver targets that I assume will be moving and such. And then these little panels are meant to be between people. So this is like a station, and this is a station. So, and then what's weird is you have 2 stations, but you have 5 rows. So I guess it's competitive, like bang, 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 that kind of thing. And then look at this nice little, this isn't even the armory. This is just the shooting range. Look at all that 1-hand and 2-hand weapon storage just in this one room. And then back here is your actual armory. It's a little pass through here. A door module. I don't know how the heck to get through that, but over here in the future, the idea is that you have an NPC that was like handing you gear. More realistically, you're going to be putting all this NPCs on engineering duty and other stuff so your ship doesn't blow up when somebody sneezes on it. So most likely this would be open, just left open, and then this room would be locked, and only people that have access, like in the party /org, can get in here. And then you'd have all your favorite gear just sitting in here. And then, of course, right there, right at the range. You can test it out, make sure it doesn't suck, make sure it's the scope you wanted, and have some fun. This is pretty amazing, to be honest. The only thing I would change is the color scheme for the range area. And yet another area that acts as like the primary armory in here. You note the suit lockers. I believe this is heavy weapon storage here. I believe. Don't quote me on that, because I haven't seen that style before. But these are definitely suit lockers. And then more two-hand goodness and one-hand goodness. So, yeah, pretty amazing. All right, so I think it's time to run again so we can get this done and keep it interesting. I mentioned that there's this tunnel. I think I run through this all already, but this is how you can look down into that area and see what's going on down below. To actually get there, though, you can go up or down from the stairwells in most places. And there's also a stack of elevators in the middle. So in order, I could go up to go down, if that makes sense, by going up and then using the bridges elevator to come back towards where I need to be. But probably what would make more sense is to, as I desync and like hit random people and they hit me. This is wild. Probably what would make more sense is to, oh, I just left that docking collar open and then they put a person in front of it. Okay, that was weird. Is to go to the elevators, which back there was the frontal turret. Wait, is this the main cargo? So I can just take these. No, that's the crappy cargo bay. Again, live. You really don't want live. You think you want live. But this is what live really feels like. So as I continue to go finding starboard and board signage, and I believe this is the other cargo bay. It's got the weird colors. We are finally cooking. Again, this is a vastly underestimated room right here that is absolutely critical to why the Idris is so useful. And now that we're going down to the hangar, one of the reasons I bring that up is because this cargo area combined with this hangar area, its main hangar, it's not its only hangar. There's a smaller one up just bird and pub from the bottom of the ship. But and we're getting there, don't worry. Means that you have an immense amount of storage space. And at the rear of the vessel, wrong way. At the rear of the vessel, there's a ramp. So there is a dang ramp at the rear of the ship. This is one of the big things, and this was contentious. So for those who are recently been questioning my Asgard attempts at like trying to soothsay what's going to happen with it and whatever else, I'm not a stranger to having something I stick by and makes sense, and I may be wrong or whatever. But one of them that I was never wrong about was the Idris having a ramp. From the earliest days, the Idris was shown, at least for its early renders, with a ramp. And then I was vindicated years later, getting slammed by people about how, oh, the ramp was removed. Oh, the ramp doesn't make any sense. The ship grew, the ramp doesn't make any sense. I was like, no, that ramp's back there. The rear of the vessel, not where the size 10 cannon. Size 10 spinal cannon is on the front, the size 10. That's fixed. This ramp is on the back of the ship. And this ramp means, plain and simple, that this thing is a god at landing on planet side or moon side and dropping immense amount of vehicles and cargo onto an area very quickly, rocking ungodly amounts of hit points between its shields, its armor, and its hull, and its immense amounts of turrets, PDSs, size 10 weapon, and of course its complement of fighters if it's running those, and then dumping all the sides of this filled to the gills with tanks and Atlas platforms such as Centurions, Ballista, and Spartans. It is immensely amazing to think. And then on top of all of that, you also have these cargo areas that are right by that ramp. So even after you dump all the vehicles, secure the area, you can still be throwing off 16 SCU containers filled with ammo and fuel to support your folks. Because yes, even ground vehicles are going to need fuel at some point. They are working towards that. So inside this area in the hangar, aside from me loving the ramp, is also multiple entry points to no one's surprise on both sides of the ship. It doesn't need to be said, but maybe it should. It's very hard to shoot from a defensive positions into this area. If an enemy lands in here, like i.e. the shields are down and they manage to get through and they just fly right through the air shield, which does not protect against a ship flying through it, and the regular shields are already down, the next thing that they would have to worry about is being shot by people that are on board, the crew. But it is worth noting that if they do manage to hold this area, this is all cargo storage, this is all capital modules, more cargo storage, more cargo storage. I mean, it is mind-boggling amounts of resources that they would have just by holding this one hangar. And a lot of the areas around the sides, frustratingly, are just windows. So this, like, you know, aluminum, steel, or whatever the lore is, this clear metal, basically, that these are made out of. You can't just shoot through them with normal weapons, but you can't shoot out of them either. So you have to risk yourself. You have to be coming in from one of these many entry points and then attempting to take back the hangar while they're busy looting this entire hangar full of stuff. So, I mean, this goes without saying, but it's going to be a really bad day if you do manage to lose your shields on such a massive ship. Anyway, back to reality. This is the pilot ready area. I was never fond of this thing. There's a couple lockers, then a couple seats. And the idea is that then they can run out of here and get out into the 3 fighters, or 5 or 6 or whatever you squeezed in there if you're not running as many ground vehicles. Again, just because they can't service them does not mean you can't fit them. That's one of the big things I've been hammering home forever on this ship. And the Kraken is the same way, by the way. So the Kraken has special hangars for the Buccaneer, for example, but not special hangars for the medium pads and such and other things like that it's running. So, by the way, you can see that that has like a little airlock, the equivalent of an airlock, I guess, on top of an air shield here. Very expensive ship. Also, I'm going to try not to fall to my death. Inside here is where the this is the other bay we talked about. This is the MPUV specific bay. So the MPUV is designed to clip into this position right here, and then this door can be closed on the bottom of the ship. This has just like most of the locations on the entire ship, there's 2 different doors on both sides. This is an entry point where somebody can make entry to attack the ship if they manage to get in. It's not ideal. And then there's a bunch of mechanics tools and other things like that right here. It's unfortunate they're there because you're not going to be repairing a tiny little MPUV that often, nor really care about it. But at least there's somewhere on the ship that has storage. Fuses all the way down in the bellows of the ship. A lot like the MSR, by the way. It just had that nerf. And then your gravity system is inside this room. One of the cooler rooms in the entire ship. I was not aware that had that. That's pretty slick. Huh. Maintenance panel seal after use. So the idea is that eventually you will have to keep that closed so you can't just walk up and see the giant spinning ball. Makes sense. Anyway, in the bows of the ship, one of the things you won't see is the size 10 railgun or laser mount access, because it's kind of just attached to the ship. If you had to repair it or replace it, you would be attaching it from the hangar, believe it or not. So we're going to go back to the hangar after there's another turret. There's another one on the other side. Again, game of hallways and duplicates on this ship, which isn't a bad thing when you're talking about such a big ship, but still, I just want to bear mentioning. And then before I go up there, let me go into the side just to show you an idea of what these look like on the sides. These are those giant windows I was talking about. These would be an amazingly good defensive position for the crew to run to and defend if there was just a couple little firing ports in this window. The idea being they wouldn't be big enough to fit a player through even if they squeezed up here somehow with jet packs on the back of an ATLS or whatever, or a ship. They get creative, but like still being big enough to be able to just pop people that are messing with the that just landed here. Look inside this gym real quick. Is there anything at all? Looks like these are stations where they'll put exercise bikes and such, and I think this is a running pad. I think that's what that is. That's nothing new, especially that it's not finished. That's nothing new. But if we go down properly one more time, and on the other side of that area that you just saw is the ATC stations. They're right there, and they're meant to control the incoming and outgoing fighters that take off. It's a little weird that they have two stations for that over there, but that is what that is. So finally, if we go to the front here, where people have just left their ships, normally these would not be stuffed to the gills with goofy cutlasses and other things like that. This would be just a normal location. You would be able to walk out to the front. As it is, I might literally be knocked off the ship or get crushed trying to get out here. I guess we'll find out real soon. Hashtag live. It is baffling to me that they would allow players to be out here, considering how much work this is to get this all set up and make this nice. Here's somebody's Polaris just falling. Whatever the heck they're doing. This is madness. Anyway, after all that work, I am not seeing the spinal railgun or the size 10 laser either, strangely. It seems like this is the P model on the newer update that I've heard people mention, where the weapon system, the size 10, is completely missing. I do not know if it just means the slot is empty, as it was previously. So the K kit was supposed to be just a stack of items, which when you look at it on the website and in your My Hangar, that's the way it looks. But in this case, obviously the conditions are a little rough, but I am not seeing the spinal weapon system. Unless it was drastically moved, this is where it's supposed to be. Now I'm going to try my best not to die here. Hashtag players. Okay, so yeah, I don't see the spinal moved as far as I can tell. I may eat my words, but this looks like it's set up to be a Idris-P, at least when it comes to the spinal gun. It could also be because it's the PTU and it's buggy and it just didn't load, or it could be a player ran off with it with a tractor beam somehow, even though it's supposed to be able to. Who the heck knows? Anyway, let me finish this tour appropriately with the ATC area. You can see a nice little area here, and you'll note all these computer systems. You'll note no defensive capacity to be able to shoot through here. I know I'm beating that drum, but it's the truth. And these look like they were supposed to have chairs that move in and out. I don't know if they used to and they just don't anymore. I either bugged out, I'm not sure. But you can see these 3 chairs here. And this looks like an entire course being plotted, or whatnot, with hazards included. So this area here is like the CIC. And you can't defend it. There's no protection at the top of the steps for a single soldier to be able to force multiply. Technically, they could be hanging out back here, being all clever, while people come up the steps, but all they need to do is know to look around and see you, and then you're completely exposed. There's no, like, I mean, they could have fixed this, but really just with one simple thing. Filled this in with metal. So then when you're defending here, it's a lot harder for them to shoot up at you than you can shoot down on them with all this protective armor. Like this literally shows that it's just not tall enough. But anyway, the ATC area is too exposed. It literally, once the shields are down, or if they manage to get through the shields somehow, the hangar is just one set of steps up to that. Too many flights. And that's kind of where I feel about all this. So I guess this is as good a spot to end this as any. Thank you for going on this tour with me. If you made it this far, you're probably one of my long-term subscribers already, and thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with me. And if you're not, please consider subscribing and give me a comment below. I tend not to do these live ones that often. It's kind of feel like I've been in the trenches with you though on these type of videos, and they're appropriate to capture the moment, and then I have a cleaned up video later on when it's in live, or it's close to live, and it's nice, beautiful and such, and not things exploding in the inside of a show Idris. But I feel like this stuff really should be documented and covered correctly. I feel like a lot of the stuff is important for us to explore, and I hope that if you're one of the people who doesn't have the time or doesn't ever want to experience the bugginess and problems of the PTU, you get the enjoyment of being able to be part of the testing process and seeing where it's going, the project in general is going, without all the nonsense, and that you get something out of it. I gotta tell you, I think this entire environment is extremely extremely nerve-wracking when I'm working in it lately. This 4.1.0 and 4.1.1 have both been something that has been, I'm not saying not feature packed, but just very strange. It seems like CIG keeps trying to find their footing. Huge nerfs to the Polaris and changes to the 890 where they basically nerfed its speed and other things, but then they did it like class wide on a lot of things. I just, I feel like sometimes we run before we walk, and sometimes in this project, I almost wish there was an entire patch cycle where they just, okay, we're going to give you one brand new vehicle or something. But the real focus is going to be all like, give us like 500 fixes. I feel like that would be healthier in some cases. With these big shows and such, they really are a drain on resources. If you haven't heard already, CitizenCon is virtual this year only, so that is good for people that are virtual anyway, I would argue, and people that are, it's bad for people that wanted to go or were considering going. You know, hopefully we'll still have the energy we have. So this event right here shows what could be in game all the time for these large things like CitizenCon. I'm still shocked that we have not had in-game CitizenCons already. Like, just open these halls, just copy and paste them, and then put a video feed in there of the event, you know, where backers can just join up a whole bunch. And certainly it would be a good stress test of the servers, right? Anyway, I am out of here. Again, thank you to my long-term subscribers for putting up with me. And you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take care.